week. We've been in a series on marriage and relationships, so this is the last week we'll be doing that. What? Did you say something, Mike? No? Okay. Oh, it's the people behind you. Grandparents. We wanted to wrap it up by just mentioning a few really important things that we didn't get to mention. Building a marriage, obviously, is a lifelong endeavor. And that relationship is the most important relationship you will have in your life. A lot of people think your relationship with your kids is like the top relationship, but when you get to our age, you realize that your kids really do move out. They really do, create their own families. And really the one relationship that will be forever is your spouse. And it's so important to nurture that relationship. I saw Amanda is in a marriage and family class right now at her university, so it's interesting to look through her textbook at some of the most current research. And a couple of the things that were so interesting to me is they can predict, by Prepare and Rich, which some of you have done with us, it's a marriage inventory. So there's two models that they can predict the success of marriage. One is Prepare and Rich, their scores at the premaritally, or Dr. Gottman also has an inventory. But what was interesting was if you can have a 5-to-1 ratio of negative versus positive things in your relationship is more likely to succeed. And what that means is that whole thing of dating, that whole thing of trying to make your spouse laugh, so even if you have all this conflict, if you can add enough positive in as well, you can actually alter the rate of success, of long-term success of your marriage. Does that make sense? And I just mentioned that because we haven't talked a lot about adding to your marriage. We've talked a lot about what you kind of shouldn't do, or the pitfalls, but so important to nurture your relationship. Make sure that you are dating your spouse, that you're continually wooing each other and making each other feel important, like you are the most important person in their life. Anything to add to that?
Nope.
Okay. This quote. I have always loved this quote. It's from a movie, Shall We Dance? But listen to this. We need a witness to our lives. There's 1 billion people on the planet. I mean, what does one life really mean? But in a marriage, you're promising to care about everything. The good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things, all of it, all of the time, every day. You're saying your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because I will be your witness. It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Anything to add to that?
No.
Okay, I also, are you ready to show a video? Let's start off with the Tim Hawkins video.
Yeah, man. I tell you what, music helps us out a lot. I love to sing. I sing in weddings, believe it or not. Why don't y'all shut your mouth? I had a friend call me not too long ago. He said, dude, I'm getting married. I want you to sing at my wedding. I'm like, okay, I'd be honored. When are you getting married? He goes, in 2 weeks. I'm like, well, thanks for the heads up. And I said, well, when do you want? He goes, well, my friend I wanted to sing, he fell through, so I called you. Well, flattered, thank you. I said, okay, when do you want me to sing during the wedding? He goes, well, when the bride's walking down the aisle. I want you to sing then. You sure about that? Oh. I said, okay, well, what do you want me to sing? He goes, you pick. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Half of me's going, no way. The other half of me's like, I can make this a wedding no one's ever going to forget. There's a lot of songs wouldn't go well. Be very appropriate at a wedding. We're walking down that. What's love got to do? Got to do. That wouldn't be very appropriate. Heard it from a friend who. Heard it from a friend who. Heard it from another. You've been messing around. That wouldn't be good at all. She's my best friend's girl, but she used to be mine. That wouldn't. You might lose a friend over that one. Oh, there's worse. But I still haven't found what I'm looking for. You can't always get what you want, but you can try sometimes. You might find you get what you need. Yeah. Who gives this woman? You just like a lady. I'm sorry. We're going to cut that. That's not going to be on the show.
David Peck, I thought you would particularly enjoy that. The music. Okay. All righty. Okay, so a few of the things that we have not talked about yet that are important factors in your relationship are family of origin issues, which we're going to unpack, personality differences. We're going to go talk today about Dr. Gottman's 4 horsemen of the apocalypse of your marriage, forgiveness, and then if we have time, we're going to do conflict resolution. All right, so family of origin. Both of you bring to the table an entire history of relationship with your family. And how you are raised in your family makes a big difference in the expectations that you bring to your relationship. Do you want to jump in there?
Well, today, I guess we're kind of breaking stuff down into nature versus nurture. And the nature part will be the personality that you bring to the table, but the nurture part is the world that you grew up in, which includes things like communication, conflict resolution, all those things that took place in your home. The way that happened gets brought into your marriage unless you are particularly aware of it and dealing with it specifically. One of the examples I like to use is, say, you've got a young man from, he's basically lineage is Italian, and so when his family gets together for meals or celebrations, it's very loud. Everybody hugs. It's lots of food, lots of fun. And he decides, he falls in love with a girl who is maybe from the Northeast, very well-educated family. She's taught at an early age to pursue her education. They're not very family-oriented. They encouraged her to be independent. Their meals are very quiet. They talk about things in kind of low-key voices. And so when these worlds come together, one of the dynamics that can happen because of the way that they were raised is that the Italian boy presses in for relationship all the time. He loves to hug. He loves he's loud, and sometimes that embarrasses his spouse. He's wanting to include her in everything, include her with his family. She feels smothered by that. That's not her experience in her family home. She likes independence, and he reads her independence as, you don't love me. You don't want to be with me. You don't want to be with my family. You don't like anything about me. And so, you see where what's love got to do with it? Sometimes love isn't enough if there's not some kind of way to break down the worlds that you were raised in so that there's an understanding. He's loud and boisterous because of where he comes from, and her resistance to that is not rejection, it's just weird. It's outside the realm of her experience. She likes quiet, she likes study, she likes her own independence, and she feels smothered by him, and he feels like he's having to chase her all the time. And he feels like she's unhappy because she doesn't want to participate in the way that he does with life and family. So that's just an example of two worlds. You know, you're not two halves coming together to make a whole. You're two whole worlds coming together to make another whole. And so that brings with it everything that you have, your personality and everything, also the family of origin that you grew up in. You could have a family that was great at communicating, and you could have a family that was horrible at communicating. You put those two worlds together, and there's automatic conflict, not because they don't love each other, but because they're not able to communicate in a way that makes each other feel loved and appreciated.
Yeah. Dino and I, we're going to talk about personality in a second, are absolutely opposite on every personality test that we've ever taken. And we also, our family of origins are very, very different. So we had to learn, we had to recognize it in order to not accuse each other. Oh, well, you're just, or you're just. Oh, wait a second. This is how you were raised. So one of the things was like even vacations. My family, when we vacation, we chocked it full of everything, right? Let's go skiing at 10, then we're going to go ice skating at 2, and then we're going to, we want to chock everything fun we can into this 1 week that we have to do stuff. Dino's family this is a time for me to turn off my phone, turn off everything, sit and read.
You go to one place, and you stay there the whole vacation, and then you go home.
Yes. And so, but it really was hard to work through that, busting through to, oh, wait, this makes sense. Okay, now how do we solve this together? And it's just another area that we move from accusing each other. Well, you're just, I don't know, lazy or something. Well, you're just too busy or something, to, okay, how do we work this out so that it's beneficial and happy for both of us? I know we had mentioned earlier about a couple of weeks ago about me bringing a lot of energy to the conversation. Do you remember that? Like I would want to talk to him about something, my day or something, and da-da-da-da-da-da, but he would feel like I was attacking him almost, like the level of intensity that I brought to the conversation would cause him to back off, and I would feel his heart shut down. Well, interestingly, there's a twist on that with us, because in an argument, my family, we were taught you don't ever yell, like peace is the highest goal in our home. Dino's family is more the loud, yelling at each other, or at least your dad, not your mom. So when we began to get in arguments, because prior to getting married, we were much more well-behaved toward one another, and then something happens when you get married, and it's kind of some of the true stuff comes out. But he would yell, and I would be, why are you so angry? Like, we can talk, and I'm not angry. We had to work through the family differences and even come up with the same semantics. Okay, what does it mean to be angry?
Yeah, I wasn't busting anything up or anything. I was just
passionate. He wasn't throwing anything, so he wasn't angry.
I mean, I'm passionate when I'm arguing something because I want to be right, and so my voice escalates and that kind of stuff.
But some of that was the family of origin stuff that we had to work through and really communicate through in order to really bring peace to our relationship. It helps to see what habits and attitudes we bring into relationship from our family of origin. In Prepare and Rich, it has these quadrants that show where your family of origin is and then where you are in relationship to that. And the more you communicate, the more you problem solve together, the more centered you become. All right, that's family of origin stuff. And the takeaway is, I mean, even in friendships, even in your own personal health, in your own personal emotional health, it's important to think back, what were the dynamics of my home? What things do I bring to the table that I don't necessarily like about myself? I mean, you can do this not only in your marriage, but your own personal emotional health and growth.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things about that is on the tests that we give, the premarital and the marital test from Prepare and Rich. In the family of origin, it talks about whether the family that you came from is connected or disconnected, whether it's overly connected or overly disconnected. So if you're on the outside scale of being overly connected and the other person is overly disconnected, you've got quite a distance to bridge to bring just your communication together. I mean, a lot of people don't even talk about family of origin and then where you are on the scale, because sometimes you'll come from a family of origin, say, that's overconnected, and you didn't like it. And so you want to establish something that's not as connected because it feels smothering to you. So, knowing your family of origin is a good thing for you just personally to know, because that will determine a lot of times your reaction to other relationships.
So true. All right, then we're going to talk about personality differences. We've hit on this multiple times, but the most important thing for the longevity of your relationship, and even, again, this is in personal relationships, interpersonal relationships across the board, not even just in marriages, is to understand that we are each so unique and so complex. I think most of the time we're very egocentric, and so we think that other people think the way that we do, or that they see things the way that we do. And so often our relationships, we just skirt across the top, bumping into each other, and we don't take the time to really see, who are you? How do you see this? Because we tend to want people to see things the way that we do. We see this all the time. As a pastor, it's hard to navigate because you can't ever assume, there's probably 50% of people that when they're ill do not want you to call them, or they don't want a hospital visit. That's me. I'd prefer nobody even know. I don't want somebody to, it takes so much energy if you're not feeling good to have to entertain someone. So I would rather be left alone. But then there are people who are very, very upset when you don't kind of slather them with attention when they're ill. And so it's important to know, who am I dealing with here? What does this person, we've talked about it with having a little section over here for the introverts who don't feel like talking to anybody and wearing a button, please don't talk to me today. But there's nothing wrong with that. It takes every single one of us. It's like the body of Christ is the body. So some's a big toe, some's a heart, some's a finger. There's nothing wrong with the introverts. We need them as well because they are our deep thinkers. They are deeply creative. They'll be problem solvers on the inside. If we can learn to appreciate, wow, this person will never talk to me on the phone, but I deeply love and respect her wisdom. Do you know what I mean? Instead of criticizing someone's differences, which that's what most often we do, oh, they're not like me, so there's something wrong. How do we see and then celebrate the differences? Jesus, I mentioned this before too, but it's just so important. And this is fundamental, again, to all relationships. But if we look at Jesus as our example, he was intensely intimate with the Father. He was intimate with John. He had one person, one human, that he was very intimate with. And then he had 3 that he was not as intimate, but still very close to. Then he had 12 that he was much less intimate, but hung out with. But then he had the 70 and the 144 that were just the crowd, like that he didn't offer his heart to in the same way, not his life for, but I'm talking about intimacy of relationship, right? If we're talking about good communication, really knowing one another, really celebrating one another, you cannot have that. You don't have the capacity to have that with more than a handful of people. You just don't. And that needs to be okay. We've been sold this bill of goods that we have to be everything to everybody all the time, and you just do not have the capacity to do it if you're going to be an authentic person and be genuine.
That's what Chris is saying is that's not what Paul was saying when he says, I want to be all things to all men. What he meant by that was he was more interested in building bridges with people who are like, who were Pharisees or scribes, or to win people, he had to in some way find a way to be on their side. But that's not the same thing as being a chameleon who tries to change in every environment that you're in. Your personality is your personality. You don't have to, I guess a over the top example is I don't have to tattoo up to reach a tattooed generation. It's not in my nature to wear tattoos. I don't like them. I grew up, the only people I knew that had tattoos were prisoners and people that served in the armed forces. So I did neither one of those. So I wasn't in the mix. But
all his children have tattoos, so.
Yeah. So, and I love all my kids. And it really is, it's not a place I'm going to draw a battle line. But I'm just saying, we don't change who we are to relate to other people. We remain ourselves, but we can build bridges. And one of the ways that Paul did that was he took Silas and was it Silas that he had circumcised, and so that he could be a part of the Jewish group that he was trying to reach. He didn't want to offend them by having someone who was uncircumcised with him reaching those people. But it didn't change Silas's personality or who he was essentially.
So there's we don't have time to do it today, but maybe in January or something it would be really fun to do. Pause for a second. We are body, soul, spirit, triune beings, and our emotional lives will influence our spiritual life, and our spirit. We do not have the ability to separate our spiritual life from even our body or our soulish life. And so that's part of the reason, Dino, you mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but we're doing this because the health of your relationships, your personal emotional health is incredibly important in your spiritual health. It absolutely is, as well as your body. Like if you're sick, it can affect the way that you view God. It can affect your ability to have faith. We're just so integrated. So that's an aside for why we feel like even this personality thing that I'm fixing to talk to you about is important. Go ahead.
Yeah, in the epistle, 1 John, John says basically if you claim to love your brother but you hate him and you love God, you're a liar. I mean, he uses very strong language there because there's a connection inside of us, and we're not able to just break that connection. If we're not connected with God and with our brothers and sisters, then we have broken something, because God commands us. It's one of the highest commands that he has, to love one another. And so if we're not loving one another, how can we love an invisible God that we don't see and touch and interact with in the same way that we do humans? So our relationships, even at a church level, are extremely important to our spiritual life. And the idea that we can be monks, that we can separate ourselves from society, is sort of an unknown in the New Testament. You just don't see it. You had groups that came to that, the Essenes and others, that were communities that were desert communities. But as far as Christianity was concerned, it was meant to be something that interacted with other people. I mean, just think of it. Our mission in life is to influence people for the kingdom of God. And how can we do that if we're stuffed away in the desert somewhere? It's antithetical to the gospel itself.
So personality differences. We were talking about maybe doing this in January or something. If you guys would want to, there's a personality test for the big 5 traits, and it's fascinating. You can take it, and then your spouse can take it, and they link the two. Your kids can take it. Jacob took it, and I linked us to see how we interact, and the big 5 are extroversion versus introversion, agreeableness, disagreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism. And it's so interesting because, well, it's just fascinating, and it can help develop conversation between the two of you that will cause your intimacy to grow because you become curious about one another. How do you see this? It's one of my favorite questions to ask Dino when he'll say something that I'm like, what? And what makes you think that? I mean, even now, because we change, right, through trauma, we change through life, we change through, like, to continue to stay curious about your spouse and say, wow, what's driving you in that? What are you thinking? But not in a contemptful way, right? But really with curiosity. Seriously, I don't see that at all, but that's so fascinating. You can do that, or you can turn it to criticism and contempt, which is not helpful for your relationship at all. So anyway, we may do that if you guys think it. Well, I think I'm going to say we're going to do that. We'll bring it to the table, maybe have everybody take it, and then we'll talk about the differences on a Sunday morning just so you can fill out. And it doesn't have to be just married couples. It can even be for self-discovery. Wow. Who knew that I was so high? That's why I'm so high on agreeableness. That's why I'm always trying to make everybody happy. Or, wow, he's so low on agreeableness. That's why he just doesn't care. Dino's very low on agreeableness. So you guys can... he'll tend to just say what he thinks. He doesn't care and it's part of his personality.
Grumpy.
No. But see, it's wonderful because for a person high in agreeableness, he pulls me towards center, and I pull him towards center. And that's part of what is beautiful about a marriage relationship. It can only be harmful when you hold your standard of how you view the world and you put that on another person and say, you have to feel the way that I do, you have to see this the way that I do. It cannot be healthy for a relationship.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Gottman's 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Dr. Gottman is a psychologist. These 4 horsemen are talked about in many, many textbooks. It's sort of kind of a breakthrough way of thinking. He's done a lot of research. Horsemen of the Apocalypse, right, are the demise, the destruction of the marriage. What are the 4 things? Criticism, contempt, so bad, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And so we're just going to touch on those real quick. These are weeds in your garden. Dino talked about how our marriages are gardens that we need to be seeding good seeds into and weeding bad things out of. These weeds are noxious weeds that have to be taken out by the root. Criticism is it's not bringing something up, it's how you bring something up. You could say your husband's late. You never think about how your behavior is affecting me. You didn't just forget. You're selfish. You never think of others. You never think of me. It's the never and always words. Whereas a complaint is, man, that scared me. I thought you were going to be home at 6 and you didn't get home till 7. I thought we'd agree that we'd call each other if we were going to be late. It's the way that you bring up a complaint that is rather it's criticism or a legitimate complaint. Contempt, Do you guys know what contempt is? That's the rolling of the eyes. That's the when your husband is so different than you, you go, that's dumb. Ugh. Do you know what I mean? It's the. Do you have anything to add to that? I'm trying to pull words.
Well, I think a lot of times it betrays itself in language that you use. And so usually contempt comes out most of the time with other people in the way that you talk about your spouse. And you sort of get used to talking about it that way, and then you bring it into the relationship. And what contempt is it's criticism that's negative, but its intent is mockery. It's meant to make you feel small. It's made to make you feel like you're inadequate or you're not enough. And the whole thing behind contempt is the intent of it. The intent is not to reconcile the relationship. The intent is to punish or to strike back because you've been hurt or you feel like you've been neglected somehow. And so it's a roundabout way. Instead of confronting something directly, it's an indirect confrontation, if you will.
And I think it has, it always has a level of superiority to it. Like you can recognize it in your own heart if you're feeling superior to your spouse or to a friend or even your children, talking down to them. That's where contempt would be. Would you just sit around and play those stupid video games, or anything that is demeaning in the way that you speak is contemptful. Couples who show contempt for each other on a regular basis are more likely to suffer from infectious diseases. Like it literally lowers your immune system to live in that environment of contempt. Contempt is the single greatest predictor of divorce, according to Dr. Gottman's studies and the Prepare and Rich studies. When you get to the point where you don't respect your partner anymore, and because that's where contempt comes in, the marriage is basically over. Any input or any yes, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense? I feel like I didn't come up with some good analogies, but
I do just want to throw something in. We have no problem quoting psychologists, doctors, whatever. But some people see this dichotomy between spirituality and the world and those kind of, like it's worldly wisdom somehow. But here's the deal. All truth is God's truth. He's the originator of truth. And so these doctors and psychologists and stuff, they stumble across the truth every once in a while. And so we want to bring that out when that happens. There's not a conflict there between, it's not only God's truth. All truth is God's truth. And all truth that we find is just true. And so there's no reason for us not to use it. True that. Huh?
Oh, Gannon asked, what about how self-contempt affects relationships? Self-contempt, you'll do the same thing, but turn it inward. Well, I'm just so stupid. So if you're in an argument with your spouse, they're bringing something to the table. Some people use self-contempt as a tool, but it's really a tool of deflection. Okay, well, I'm just so terrible. I can't do anything right. What does that do? Completely effectively shuts down all communication. It's a facade.
Sorry,
nice,
that's an inside joke.
Now you have to tell everyone. You have to. Mandolin, come up here and tell what happened. You must. Because you have to say it out loud for everyone to hear.
Okay, everybody who knows me knows I love reading. I love reading way too much. And so I found out this week from my lovely mother that I've been saying a word wrong my entire life. Facade. But how I have pronounced this, and any of you who know me and heard me do this and did not help me, owe me an apology. Facade.
I never heard you say it.
A facade. People walk around wearing a facade.
Thank you. Facade is not a word.
You are so funny. Adorable.
I haven't either.
No, see, here's the thing, Amanda. You say things with such confidence that people, like literally, she'll be like, oh, there's 8 continents. And everybody's like, okay, there must be 8. So I think when you've said it before, people are just like, oh, that must be another word that means the same thing. And they don't take the time to go look at it in the dictionary. Yeah. Yeah, or Stephanie said a word she doesn't know yet. Of course, Amanda would know it. Thank you for sharing that. That was hilarious. Okay, so contempt. Oh, yes, self-contempt just is a deflection to get the person off your... It's Dan Allender describes it as throwing sand in your partner's eyes. The whole point is to get them to look away from you. And it is illegal behavior as well.
And I struggled with depression for years, and one of the things that I noticed about it is that depression has this thing where when a person gets into a cycle of depression, there's always a measure of self-contempt in it. But people who struggle with depression can also act out, and rather than becoming depressed, they will become contemptful toward people around them, and they'll become very negative about the world around them.
For sure. Yeah.
It's just a quick pro tip if your partner struggles with self-contempt is, like if Amanda says something negative about herself, the lighthearted response to point out that you shouldn't be doing that is like, don't talk about my wife that way. No one talks about my wife that way, but it's her. So that's a playful, fun way to point out. It's like, don't do that. And anyway.
Sweet, and what a wonderful example of how to get on the same side of something, right? Because that could so easily turn into a big old fight, and it just doesn't have to if you put yourself on the same side as your spouse. Thank you. Okay, the third thing of Dr. Gottman's things is defensiveness, typically a response to criticism. You guys know what defensiveness is. If somebody brings something to the table, it's so easy to go, wait a second, well, you da-da-da, or turn it around, or just shut down completely. Which the question is, okay, wait a second, I'm not trying to attack you. Maybe I said that wrong. Can you help me say this in a way that will not cause a defensive response to rise up in you? Again, it's putting yourself on your partner's side. Wait, what did I do to cause this defensive reaction? It must be the way that I said something. How can I say this differently?
Nobody likes to be wrong, especially in an argument. So that's what really causes the defensiveness most of the time. It feels like an attack on your ability to know truth.
Yeah.
A lot to do with pride. It's all.
So say you would use that to cause you to rise up, because the trigger press on you.
Yeah.
Yes.
In order for you to attack the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
you got to put pride aside for a relationship to work.
Well, it's mutual submission, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what Scripture demands of us. And man, it's just so important to value love, hopes all things, believes all things, trusts all things, like to value our spouse as higher than ourselves is what Scripture says, preferring one another in love. And those things, this is how to do those things. Like, how do I hear you and hear where you're coming from? Because I want to know who you are and how you tick and how you see things. And it's the humility of being able to say, okay, I don't have it all right. I don't know everything. My view isn't the right view. That's the biggest thing. How do I tell myself my view is not the right view? Let's talk about it together.
Yeah, and also, I think in this area, I mean, this is part of problem solving too, but you know, a lot of times you have to ask yourself a question: is this a mountain or a molehill? Is this rust on the railing, or is this a hole in the boat? Because sometimes we bring so much emotional intensity to something that's just a little rust on the railing and needs to be cleaned up. So, you know, you choose your battles. You choose what's important to really stand your ground on. And the other things we use a scale, you know, 1 to 10. Is this a 2 or a 3? It doesn't mean much to me. Or is this a 8 or a 9 where I'm willing to go to war over this thing and we'll see where we end?
We didn't get to talk, we forgot to talk about that. I mean, we've mentioned it several times. I loved when Dwight and Leslie were up here. Dwight, you said, tell me if this is a 10 or is this a 5? Like, I need to know how important this is to you. And it's such a wonderful way to just help each other, to guide each other in what we need. And so for Dino and I, we developed this sort of 1 to 10 thing to be able to objectively tell each other how important something was, right? So we both just take something simple. We want to go out to eat. He says, I want, I don't know, hamburgers. And I say, I want Italian, whatever.
She wants Mexican.
100% every time. See, after you've been married a while, some of that stuff just doesn't, it's so nice to be married to someone who knows you well. But anyway, how important, okay, wait, you said that like you really, really want this. Is this like what is this to you? Is this like an 8 or a 9? And he'll be like, oh, that's a 2. Okay, well, it's a 5 to me because I've been craving Mexican all day. Do you know what I mean? It's just a really simple way to communicate about things. And we do it from the simplest decisions to the most complex decisions. Like, what degree of importance is this to you? Now, caveat, we've had people who are like, everything's a 10. Everything can't be a 10 because then, again, you're not submitting to one another. You're not preferring one another. You're not, does that make sense? If everything's a 10, then you got another conversation to have.
Or everything can't be a 2.
Yes, because then
that
you just
means
don't
you
care.
don't care. Yeah.
Yes.
I see her lips moving, but I didn't.
Yes. If everything's an issue, you'll never not have conflict.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't have my.
Can I tell y'all, there is so much to say about all of this. Do you know what makes does anybody in here dance? Do any couples in here dance, like ballroom dancing? Okay, Amanda, you be my person. Come see. Dad's tired.
I have 2 left feet.
Okay, hold. I want you to, that's okay. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to be it doesn't even matter if I'm male or female, but you put your hand against my shoulder.
Okay.
I'm going to put my hand against you. Yep. And let's just hold hands like this. Yep. And I'm going to tell you, when we move together,
you're pushing my hip.
I am, but here, what she's doing is pushing against me. Like there has to be a resistance there always has to be a resistance to the movement if we are to dance well together. Does that make sense? If you are nothing, don't even push against me or nothing and let me just try to move you. Like you're going to be just a noodle. Does that make sense? Because here's the thing. Anytime, like you can try to move, it's the resistance that gives you the steadiness, like for you to think that there shouldn't be resistance to each other or resistance to the relationship is it's not smart. Like we have to have it. We have to have it to grow. We have to have it to develop intimacy. We have to have it to even discover each other and the joy of being the mystery of marriage. The pushing back is required. So much of our unhappiness, I think, in relationship comes from our expectation. If we just think, oh, we love each other, so everything's going to always be good or always be easy, and it just doesn't happen. There will always be resistance, and it's actually a good thing. If you can change your mindset about that, it could help a whole lot.
And I don't, I don't want to be critical, but, we talked about how Hollywood influences our relationships a lot of times, and it's almost unspoken. You watch movies and you sort of, this stuff drifts in. I can't live without you. And it's a lie. It's not true. You absolutely can. But it's trying to romanticize something to make it bigger than what it really is. Well, Christianity has done a lot of damage to relationships too. And this ideal that we've been married for 60 years and we've never had a fight. When I hear that, I'm like, there's something really wrong with you. I mean, somebody's not standing up to be who they are, because without that resistance, you're not being who you are,
Exactly.
because it's two different worlds coming together. It's not, I'm just saying that a lot of times we get painted these goals for relationships that aren't true. We need to be working through reality and and instead be able to talk about how do we solve differences. Because if you don't have differences, man, you married yourself. How gross is that? I would never want that. I like opposite, I want a little fire and heat in my relationship, and so I got it. I had to wait till I was 34, but I got it, So, it's just be careful the voices that you listen to, because there's all kinds of voices out there, and some of them have a Christian label, but it's not always God's wisdom and it's always not based in reality. Some of it is fairy tale stuff that gets drifted in.
And it really, there is even in our relationship with God, like so many think that it's about like serving God and just doing what he wants. But the deeper Christian life, the deeper spiritual life is when your focus becomes, I want to know who this God is. Like, what makes him tick? He's so expansive. We could never discover, even if we spent 24/7 trying to discover and see the many facets of who he is, we would never discover enough. And that really, really is the goal. That's what intimacy is. It's knowing someone so deeply. And that is the beauty of marriage. Like, we get the opportunity to really discover the depths of who another person is. And the depths are unsearchable. Like, every conversation is an opportunity to say, wow, I tell you, we won't go to a political realm. We're not opening a door to talk about it right now. Thank you. But for me to go, wow, that's how you see that? That is so interesting. And it doesn't have to be a big fight about being right or wrong. Does that make sense? Like, you can have different viewpoints, and it's okay to have different viewpoints and still love each other deeply. Now, people use we agree to disagree in order to keep distance. Again, that's the false part. I'm not talking about that. But it's discovering each other so deeply, and leaving room for people to grow and change.
Yes.
All right, the fourth thing, stonewalling, and that's when you basically just withdraw, shut down, fine, whatever, and you walk away from a conversation or from a conflict. Absolutely illegal. The legal way to do it is, man, we're so escalated right now, we're not going to go anywhere positive with this. The moment you feel an emotional escalation, there's no need to continue, because words that you wish you hadn't said are going to come out of your mouth. So the way is not to stonewall, whatever, but it's to say, man, I really want to work through this, but I can't do this right now. Can we meet tomorrow at 6:00? Or something like that, and literally set up a time to come back and talk about it. And that gives you space to really think about what you want, both of you, and bring that to the table. Does that make sense? Okay, so the four things were stonewalling, defensiveness, contempt, and criticism. Those are the four noxious weeds that absolutely have to be removed from your relationship if you're going to have an intimate relationship.
Can I throw an aside in? How are we doing for time?
We have about 5 minutes, and we're going to do forgiveness too.
I can't talk fast, so.
That's right. It's important.
It just dawned on me. One of the areas of conflict I see in couples a lot of times is an issue of control. And you hear it sometimes when people are dating. It's like, hey, this person that you're seeing is, I mean, you guys are talking about marriage, but, there's some issues there. There's some, oh, well, when we get married, I'll be able to change them. I'll be, it's like a pet project. It's like I'm going to be able to move those areas of their personality or their nurture that annoy me, and we'll be fine. And so a lot of times marriages begin with an idea that, or there's a discovery in the first month or two of the relationship that you didn't know about, and you have to make adjustments. And so it's very easy for one spouse or the other to get in this mindset of controlling the other person. And let me tell you, as a pastor, it's probably one of the pitfalls that you have to avoid all the time, because you want people to do better than they're doing. And the reason for it is not because for any other reason except that if a person is following God's plan for their life, what God has planned for human beings in general, that your life will be better. And I don't mean better in terms of you'll have more money and you'll have everything you ever wanted. I mean better in terms of deeply fulfilling. God has made us a certain way to run on certain things. And so our temptation is to try to make people conform to an image that we have in our head where you stop doing this and you don't do this anymore and you don't make this mistake. But the truth is that if you go to 1 Corinthians 13, love is long-suffering, love is patient, love is kind. And so it's unkind and it's impatient for us to try to change our spouse. Let God be the Holy Spirit and change people. And you encourage them. They get discouragement everywhere else. Home should be the place where you encourage them. And of course, it's a sticky issue because you get into codependency. And I'm not talking about codependency. I'm just talking about being a little more of a cheerleader than the police in your home. Policing is fine when you're out there policing the world for certain reasons, but don't police your spouse. It's annoying. It makes them feel criticized all the time and never measuring up. And so it's important for our home. We had talked about that, making these rules of engagement in your home. It's important in our home for us that one of our rules of engagement is that we create this as a safe space for us. We get criticized all the time, and I'm sure you do too, by different kinds of people in different environments, but you should go home to a safe place. And that should be your safe place, because that will absolutely invigorate you for change in a way that criticism can't.
Yes, so let me, this is a perfect time to wrap this up with a bow of that quote again. Can I repeat it? We need a witness to our lives. There's 1 billion people on the planet. I mean, what does one life really mean? But in a marriage, you're promising to care about everything, the good things, the bad things, the terrible things, the mundane things, all of it, all of the time, every day. You're saying your life will not go unnoticed because I will notice it. Your life will not go unwitnessed because